Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today I thought we'd try out the new 007 game on my i7 4790K PC. I was going to try integrated graphics with the 5600G and I was even tempted to try the Core i3 with UHD graphics, but unfortunately I couldn't get the game to launch on either. So I thought we'd put the 4790K system to the test, the good old i7 from 2014. This is a 4-core, 8-thread chip paired with 16 gigs of 1866MHz DDR3 and, to start with, a GTX 980, a card from the same year and one with 4 gigs of GDDR5 VRAM. I've heard mixed things about performance, so let's see how it runs on this old school setup. Now, unlike with the integrated graphics, the game actually launched, which is always a good start, though it did take a fair while to load the shaders. That doesn't matter though, of course, because we did eventually end up in the game, and the first thing to do was to set all the available options from the menus to their respective lowest. Literally everything. I couldn't find any actual preset options, so you have to go through things individually. It would seem here, it doesn't matter what we choose, we will be exceeding the VRAM limit as shown in the bottom right corner. Now to start with, we'll use 1080p at native resolution, and yes, 30 frames per second is not going to be possible with this hardware. That said, I think the i7 is certainly more than capable, and we'll be upgrading the GPU a little later on just to see how well it pairs with something newer. But with the 980, yeah, 30 FPS is a bit of a struggle here. We're looking at 20 to 25 most of the time. I'm actually going to go into the settings now and enable upscaling. We can choose from DLSS or FSR. Obviously not DLSS with the old GTX 980 here, so we will be choosing FSR by default instead. Now I'm going to aim for 30 plus frames per second because I think 60 is out of the question. So we're going to opt for the balanced mode, which should push us over the 30 FPS threshold, considering we were quite close to it just now. And there we are, 30 plus frames per second in 007 First Light here, with a few dips and drops below that figure, of course. This is an early training mission, and here we're outdoors pretty much most of the time. Those areas with not as much going on will exceed 40 frames per second, and the same can be said for those indoor areas as well. I played a little bit of a nightclub level next, and the frame rate was over 35-40 FPS, but 30 FPS is doable a lot of the time from my initial gameplay impressions here. We can see that it is the graphics card that is pretty much maxed out all of the time, which leads me to believe that the i7 CPU has a little more to give, meaning we can get away with a more powerful graphics card. It's worth bearing in mind that the i7 in this situation is overclocked to 4.5 GHz. Didn't actually stick to that 4.5 GHz clock speed throughout. There were a few drops to just 4 GHz, but that's probably because it's the graphics card that is the primary limiting factor, pretty much pegged at 95+% most of the time during my gameplay session today. As we can see here, as we make our way into this building, we are seeing at least 40 frames per second, so it's nice to see that the game can be played on over 10-year-old hardware, but you aren't going to get a 60 FPS experience from it. Let's just see if we can wipe out the rest of these guys here. I imagine this stealth section is going to absolutely fall apart in a minute, and what I mean by that is that I'm probably going to give up and go in all guns blazing. That's what usually happens. I stick to stealth for a while and then I get bored of sneaking around and end up just causing chaos. Yeah, right, we need to capture the flag at the top of that building there. Let's see if we can go and do that without disturbing everyone. Right, there's one guy here. We're sneaking around in the long grass. A staple of a lot of games now. You want stealth, you just hide in the grass, job done. We'll sneak up on them. Oh, who do I go to first? Let's try it. I think we're going to go back. Yeah, we're going to go back. Let's go back, too risky. Let's see if we can make our way around this side. I'm not really... Oh dear, that's failed. Yeah, didn't exactly do a brilliant job of the stealth there, but I think I'd be a bit more careful in my own personal playthrough. This is just, of course, a performance test. That's my excuse and I'm sticking with it. As long as we can still get to the flag, I guess, right? We pass, so let's get up the ladder, run away from everyone chasing it. World's best spy here. Perfect. So this is the nightclub scene I mentioned earlier. 30 to 40 FPS yet again, though there will be a few more moments where we see 40 plus frames per second because it's an indoor area, though it is quite crowded and a little more strenuous on our processor, which still seems to be holding up quite well here. So the i7 4790K from 2014 doing a pretty good job. And in a second I'm going to pair it with a more powerful graphics card, something that might not make all that much sense, but it will allow the chip to stretch its legs a little more, and we should be able to get an idea of whether or not 60 FPS is possible with a card that's more powerful. I'm going to use a 4060, an unrealistic pairing as I said, but this should help to boost our frame rate. So I'm using the high settings now. All high options have been selected from the graphics menu, and there are still some places where the graphics card is the limitation. So this is very much a GPU intensive title from my initial 2-hour or so gameplay period, but this is subject to change. It depends on the level you are playing, of course, what you're doing and how many things are going on screen, I'm sure, but not bad at all from the i7, and nice to see it's still holding up in another new release in 2026. Lovely little driving section here. This is probably where we saw the most frame dips, but it didn't take long for it to pick up to above 60 FPS once again. So pretty happy with the performance in this one. The CPU holding up really well considering its age, and like I said, I'm just glad to see a CPU of this age still able to play new 2026 releases. And I've said it before in previous videos, but I do plan to keep throwing it at these latest games in its overclocked state, of course, with this motherboard. I think we may even do a few stock versus overclocked speed comparisons as well in newer titles, just to see if overclocking this does make that much of a difference when, to be honest, a lot of you are probably assuming that it's the core and thread count that's the primary limitation. I mean, I know I am. I don't think overclocking is going to do all that much these days when this is a 4-core chip, but perhaps that is something we will test out in another video. As for 007 First Light here, yeah, I'm pleased to see this CPU holding up well. If you bought one back in 2014, it would still have some surprises in store for you, that's for sure, when it comes to playing some of the latest titles. But I'm going to leave it there for this one. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know if you're playing this on older hardware, how well it's running for you, of course. I did plan to make another video with this game using integrated graphics, but I don't think that's happening with the 5600G. I've heard that some older RX GPUs don't work as well. Maybe there'll be an update, I don't know, but they are pretty old now, so I'm not too surprised. But thanks as always for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.